I'd like to spend a little time talking about the tools we're going to use now. I've got a basket full of tools. I brought some extra ones. It's pretty simple. This isn't rocket science. The tools for boat bottom painting can be just 3 or 4 items. I'm going to show you several because there's a lot of choices here. I'll show you what I like to use, but you might have some other choices of your own. I'd like to show you a little bit about the tools I like to use. I've got some extra tools here to show you some varieties, so everyone has their own idea of what's best. The main thing we're going to feature today is the smooth sailing copper Teflon boat bottom. Now, Dural makes a lot of specialty coatings, but we do make copper Teflon boat bottom paint, and we also make a series of colored urethane ones. The copper has been historically a good anti-fouling medium. There's some controversy about using copper. The San Diego Harbor has so many copper bottom boats, they were wondering whether they're getting too much copper in the water in the bay there itself. There's been no laws so far to restrict that, but there's a concern. On the other hand, any anti-fouling mechanism is going to have some impact on the marine environment. And so you can use copper, you can use tin, you can use carbons, you can use biocides, you can use Teflon for making it slippery, you can use urethane for very hard finishes. Today we're going to talk about what seems to be one of the best ones, which is a copper Teflon. And that's where the copper actually is, the grain of copper protrudes through the surface of the finish so that the organisms touch it and they dislike the taste. A lot of them will actually die from the copper content. That's a two-part product. It has a component which is the copper's done separately. That's because if you have the copper in it too long, the copper being a metal will sink to the bottom and it's hard to get it re-solubilized and reintroduced. I like to use a screw top bottle for the copper when I mix it. It's kind of interesting. I got this out last spring and I still have some copper Teflon in the bottom of it from last year, and I could use that to touch up a little bit of the boat bottom paint if I wanted to. And you can see it gives a nice shiny spot right away, a little bit on my finger. So it lasts, and the nice thing about this is you can shake it up. Now, the medium for this is a denatured alcohol, and so if it's getting a little thick or stringy, I can take a little denatured alcohol and add it to it and make it thinner. Now, thinner is not bad at all. It's just that sometimes you can see through a very thin finish because there aren't enough grains of copper, to make a full finish. So don't worry about thinning it. You can do it all the way along. The other thing is, because it's alcohol, the alcohol evaporates very quickly, and so if you have it in a shake bottle where I put the copper material in, then I cut my bag of copper, and we'll be doing this when we start doing the application, and stick it in. I will be able to shake it up as I go. I can flip the top open, and I'll use a tray of some kind. Today I'm going to try this little tiny tray. I'm going to just use a 4-inch one, roller, and put it in there. And that means less surface area, means less evaporation, means that I have to screw around with adding material less often. And I keep my material nice and liquid. If it starts getting a little thicker, sometimes you get a little string, like a little bubble gum string on it. Sometimes I'll use a bigger tray, a bigger boat. I might use a bigger tray with a larger roller. Any roller is fine. When we do the rollers, all of them have a threaded portion on it. I'm going to grab a handle here. And I like to use a threaded handle so I don't have to crawl under the boat. And I can thread it on and then use my roller cover. And you can use virtually any kind of roller cover, but the smoother your roller cover, the better off you're going to be in terms of your final product. On the early coatings, if I'm going to do 2 coats, I might use a big roller and a fat roller cover on the first coat to get done with it quickly. But I've learned that the smoother my roller is, the better my final outcome. And so I've been starting to use these little rollers. I could use a little roller with a 1/4 inch nap, or I could found that using a roller, if I can find it, here we go, which is a mohair, is really nice, because these mohair rollers they're a shaved mohair, and they give you a very smooth finish. Now this is a handle I used last year. I'm going to use it again. It's a long handle. I don't like it too much because it doesn't really reach as far as I'd like to, but it's a nice intermediate length. I could, on the other hand, use a shorter one here. Had one a minute ago. This one here. I could use a shorter handle and then attach my long handle to it. And in the past I've used these most of the time, and they work quite nicely. And then you have a stronger piece sticking out to it. So I guess my recommendation is to use this shorter one, and then you can take it off your handle if you're doing areas along the finish of your boat. The problem with a big tray like this is it's a big surface area, so it tends to evaporate quickly. When I do squirt my material on my rollers, I'll squirt it over and then I'll roll it a little bit to get it on. I don't have much dripping. I'll slide these pieces of cardboard under to keep my sidewalk fairly clean, but I might get 1 or 2 drips, as you see from last year on here. It's really not a problem. The finish helps my trailer, and maybe in 2-3 years I might have to paint these fenders again so they don't look spotted. The main work you have to do with boat bottom painting is sanding the finish. When we sand it, this is going to turn all copper colored again. We're going to take off the oxide. It'll take off these little soap drips. It'll take off any organisms we might have had on there from last year. And this is a palm sander. I like to use the palm sander because it has a little pointed area, so when I get into little corners around fittings, it can get tight in there and I don't have so much left over. And the main stage of my sanding is using some little sponge sanding blocks. These are some 3Ms. I like the green or the purple. This one is a 60 grit. I probably wouldn't use the 60 grit on this boat bottom. It's pretty nice. But if I was doing a lot of work with filling, I might use it for my first coats, and then I might switch to a 100 grit or something like that later. Now I can do them dry. Dry is no problem, but there's some powder builds up on there. I might have to use a rag to take it off. I might have to slap these a few times on the side of the boat to get the dust out. Or I could wet sand them. I could take my garden hose, and the water carries away the little bit of material I sand off. So either way works good. Actually, one of these pads will probably do the entire boat bottom. Some people like to use a larger one. Gives a little curve to the boat, which is fine. I find just the palm one seems to work fine for me. The palm sander has different grits as well. You can choose one, and you can use any kind of palm sander. Here's a square one. I tend to like the iron-shaped ones. The only other things, when we're doing this, we're sanding a metal, and you're going to have a little bit of metal dust from it, and that's not really good for you. It's not a heavy metal. It's not cadmium. It's not lead, but still, it's a metal. So usually, using a little paper mask is a good idea. A vapor mask I like to use. I just happen to have these, so they fit a little better and a little tighter. And so I'll use them. You can see there's a little copper dust in here from last time I used it, but there's almost no odor to it. It's just a slight alcohol odor. But the grains of copper that I'm sanding off can be an issue. And I usually put this mask on while I'm mixing the powder too, just in case I get a little puff of powder as I'm doing it. And I'll probably end up with a little bit of powder on my hands. It washes off easily, but I will use a mask. I tend to use a glove. The material on your hands comes off fairly easily as well, but if you got a pair of gloves, it's handy to do. I use a fabric back on the gloves so they don't sweat so much. And I use a plastic type of palm, so if I got some liquids, it won't go through the finish. The only other things we have to consider is taping the boat off. And I have forgotten my little sponge. I use these little sponge for getting into little cracks around the keel and the rudder to get up as close as I can to my the fittings that are holding my boat up. I'm going to end up with some spots that I can't coat because this frame is in the way. The nice thing about this material is when you go to put this boat on straps to drop it in the water, at that point you can take your little sponge, sand off the little areas you missed, just coat it on. In 5 minutes it'll be ready to put in the water. You can fix all these spots then. You can even do the bottom of your keel if you like to where you can't reach it. So I wouldn't worry about it. Sometimes I don't have my materials with me. I put it in the water anyway. You know, we're really talking a couple square inches of finish that's missing. Over time, it tends to set on different places each time you put it away in the winter. So if you do this each year like I do, you're going to, eventually have everything coated nicely. Other things I'm going to use as we talk about later, we'll talk about doing a little fairing on the bottom. And we use just little plastic automotive Bondo cutting knives for doing that. The longer ones are nice because they can shape to the boat bottom a little bit, and so you can do it when you're striking off areas. And we use just a soft Bondo glazing compound because you can catch those little tiny nicks. You don't have to do any mixing. It's a soft material, but our chemist pointed out that our boat bottom will seal the boat bottom anyway. So if you're using a little softer material, it's a little easier to sand, and you can then just seal it with the boat bottom paint. And even though it's a softer material, we've got our original putty on here 4 years ago. Nothing has ever come off. We've never had a problem with any of our Bondo sliding off. And we also, even though we put it on over the top of this copper Teflon, it sticks nicely, and by sealing it in, we don't have any problems. The nice thing is each year the boat gets better and better and better. Okay, the final thing I was going to talk about is taping off our stripe. We can use blue tape is nice because it comes off even if you leave it on there for a while. We use these greens. They got some small ones for pinstriping. If you're doing some decorations. We were going to try this frog tape this year and that to see if that makes it a little straighter. The boat bottom itself is nice and smooth, so when you press this tape on, you're going to get a nice straight edge. And the boat bottom paint, the copper Teflon, is so thin, you can do 1, 2, 3 coats. It's not going to make any difference before you pull off your tape. A lot of painting you've done in your house or whatever, you'll find that the paint that glues your tape on, and when you go to pull it off, you have a lot of work, tape rips, etc. You won't have any problem with that on your boat. You don't have to worry about it even if you go a couple days before finishing everything. It should pull right off without any problem. I think that's all of our tools here. I was going to show you one other thing since we're talking about tools. This boat used to have an ablative finish on it that was soft, which would be anti-fouling because it was so soft that an organism would get on it and it would peel off a little bit of the paint and leave because the paint was on here so soft. The problem with some of those is when you take them out of the water, those finishes tend to dry out and get very chalky, and you can run your thumbnail in it, you can feel it's so soft your thumbnail goes in it. This boat had that. To remove it, we just used a pressure washer with a spiral tip. Now this tip, water pressure makes it spin like a lawnmower, so it spins a little spray, a solid round stream, and you can get so close, you can get a lot of pressure as a result. It'll actually cut concrete. You can write your name if you get too close. So you have to be a little careful using it, but we were able to get all of the soft material off before we did our sanding. Now, that doesn't mean we had it perfect. There were some spots after the first year painting that we found we hadn't gotten it so good. But by the second year, it was pretty much all gone. By the third year, never a problem again. So you can use this nice spiral tip to save yourself a lot of work and get that off. It does get into the corners nicely, and you can get in around your fittings well with it as well. See, we have a real hung handle, so we don't have to crawl around so much. Before I finish, I'm going to just mention, these are a nice feature. They're a little brush handle, and we'll sometimes put these on so that for little areas where we want to reach, way back in and not have to crawl, we can catch areas with our nap. And the sponge is fine, it'll last. These do soften up over time. I keep 2 or 3 of them just in case it gets a little soft. Sometimes the glue holding on the stick, the alcohol works on it a little bit, but they're cheap and they do fit in nicely. And if you have a brush that has bristles on it, sometimes you get bristle marks from it, which the sponge doesn't have. And of course the sponges are so much cheaper as well. And one last thing, I guess, I always wear glasses. I brought these out just to remind myself. And again, we're using some copper dust. It can get in your eyes. It's not going to hurt you, but it's nice to have the glasses on because you are working overhead most of the time. So wearing glasses is a help. I think that's everything I need to show you on these. And we'll go to another section here in a minute.